The humid Georgia air clung to the windows of my penthouse, but inside the atmosphere was clinical and cold. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting the silk lapels of my cream-colored suit. I am Kenzli, and at 34 years old, I have spent every waking second of the last 12 years building Ironwood Freight from the rust up. My hands, now manicured and soft, still remember the grime of that first broken-down diesel truck I bought with $5,000 of scavenged savings. Tonight was supposed to be the victory lap. I reached for the leather folder on my mahogany desk. Inside lay the merger documents from a global conglomerate that valued my sweat and sleepless nights at $7,200,000. This was not just money to me. It was freedom for the people who raised me. I thought about Mama Joyce and Pops Jerome, who had worked themselves to the bone in the red clay fields and cramped factories of the Old South. I wanted to tell them that their days of worrying about the mortgage or the rising price of insulin were over. I had planned this surprise for their 40th wedding anniversary at the Sundial, the most expensive revolving restaurant in Atlanta. I could already see the look of pride in my father's eyes and feel the warm embrace of my mother. I was bringing a $7 million sacrificial lamb to the family altar, hoping it would finally prove I was enough. The city lights of Atlanta twinkled below like a sea of diamonds. I checked my reflection one last time, smoothing a stray hair. I felt powerful, yet strangely vulnerable. For a decade, I had been the ghost in the machine, the daughter who missed every Sunday dinner because I was managing a fleet of 40 trucks across state lines. Tonight, the ghost was coming home as a queen. I tucked a gold pen into my pocket, the same pen I intended to use to sign the final papers tomorrow morning. I was ready to give my family the world, never imagining that they were already planning to take mine away from me. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my heart beating with the frantic rhythm of a girl who finally thought she had won the game. The Sundial restaurant rotated slowly, offering a panoramic view of the golden Atlanta skyline, but the air at our table was thick with a tension I did not understand. Reverend Miller sat to my left, nodding as Mama Joyce straightened her Sunday best. I reached for my wine glass, my heart racing with excitement. I tapped the crystal with a spoon, the sharp ring cutting through the chatter of my aunts and cousins. I told them that I had a gift for Mama and Pops, a way to ensure they would never have to worry about a single cent for the rest of their lives. I began to speak about the $7,200,000 merger, but Pops Jerome slammed his hand onto the white linen tablecloth. The silverware rattled like dry bones. He did not look proud. He looked disgusted. He told me to sit down and stop bragging about my bank account while my soul was withering away. Mama Joyce chimed in, her voice dripping with a fake sweetness that felt like acid. She told the entire table that while I was out chasing trucks and signatures, I had abandoned the true meaning of family. She pointed at my sister Destinee, who sat there with a smug grin while her 3 children made a mess of the expensive appetizers. Mama Joyce announced that the family had held a private meeting without me. They had decided that it was time for a change at Ironwood Freight. Pops Jerome stood up and declared that Destinee was the new chief executive officer, effective immediately. I felt the blood drain from my face as he explained that Destinee had 3 children to provide for, and therefore she deserved the legacy more than a cold, single woman like me. He said that I was born to serve this family, not to rule it. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing me into my chair while my relatives whispered and nodded in agreement. They did not care about the years of labor I had poured into that company. To them, my success was just a bank account they felt entitled to rob in the name of a sister who had never worked a full day in her life. I looked at the merger papers in my hand. The dream of a quiet retirement for my parents turning into a nightmare of betrayal. The sunrise over Atlanta was a bruised purple and orange, but I did not feel the beauty of the new day. I arrived at the Ironwood Freight headquarters at 6 o'clock in the morning, hoping to gather my personal belongings before the world woke up. I expected the silence of an empty office, but the heavy scent of cheap tobacco hit me the moment the elevator doors slid open. I walked toward my corner office, the one I had earned through a decade of sweat, and found the door wide open. Tyrell, my sister's husband, was sprawled in my Italian leather chair. His muddy boots were resting shamelessly on the polished mahogany surface of my desk, right next to the framed photograph of my first delivery truck. He was puffing on a thick cigar, blowing a cloud of gray smoke toward the ceiling. He did not stand up when I entered. He did not even offer a nod of respect. Instead, he flashed a yellowed grin that made my skin crawl. He reached into his jacket and tossed a thick stack of legal documents onto the desk. He told me that Mama Joyce and Pops Jerome had signed over their majority stake to Destinee late last night, and in her first act as the new owner, she had appointed him as the chief strategy officer. He laughed a dry and mocking sound and told me that my reign as the queen of logistics was officially over. He said that I was now nothing more than an unpaid consultant if I chose to stay, or a trespasser if I chose to leave. The air in the room felt heavy and toxic. Tyrell leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a greedy light. He demanded that I hand over the master passwords to the server and the biometric encryption keys for the proprietary logistics software immediately. He told me that the family was tired of my secrets and my control. He claimed that because my parents had provided the initial investment of $5,000 12 years ago, everything I had built belonged to them, and by extension, to him. I looked at this man who had never managed anything more complex than a remote control, now trying to command a multi-million-dollar empire. The injustice burned in my throat, but I kept my face as still as stone. I realized then that they did not just want the money they wanted to strip away my dignity and leave me with nothing but the clothes on my back. I looked at Tyrell and forced my breath to remain steady, masking the fire of indignation burning in my chest. I told him that if he wanted the keys to the kingdom, I would not stand in his way. I leaned over the keyboard of my main terminal, my fingers moving with a precision he could never comprehend. He watched me with a sneer, thinking I was surrendering, but in reality, I was executing the Phoenix Protocol. This was a failsafe built into the artificial intelligence algorithm I had spent 3 years coding in the lonely hours of the night. It was the digital brain of Ironwood Freight, the silent engine that calculated fuel efficiency driver schedules and real-time routing for over 40 trucks. With a few keystrokes, I tied the entire system to my own biometric signature and set a countdown that would encrypt the core data if I did not log in every 24 hours. Tyrell leaned back, blowing more foul smoke into the air, and told me that it was about time I learned my place. He laughed and said that I was just a lucky woman who happened to be in the right place at the right time. He claimed that any man with a bit of common sense could have done what I did, and that the only reason the company survived was because of the $5,000 our father had provided. He called me a glorified secretary who had forgotten her roots. I did not argue. I did not shout. I simply finished the upload, closed my laptop, and stood up with a cold dignity. I knew that within a week without my oversight, his lucky man logic would run this empire straight into a brick wall. I walked out of the office for the last time, carrying nothing but my handbag and the secret knowledge of the storm I had just unleashed. As I passed through the main garage, the heavy scent of diesel and grease greeted me. I saw the veteran driver's men like Mr. Silas, who had been with me since the first year. These were hard-working men in their 60s who had watched me grow from a girl with a dream into a titan of industry. They stood by their rigs, holding their coffee thermoses, looking at me with eyes full of confusion and heartbreak. They knew something was wrong. Mr. Silas took off his cap and took a step toward me, his weathered face etched with worry. I could not tell them the truth yet. I just gave them a tight nod, my heart breaking for the chaos they were about to endure under Tyrell's hand. I walked to my car, the silence of the parking lot, feeling like the calm before a devastating hurricane. 2 weeks had passed since I walked away from Ironwood Freight, and the reports from my remaining contacts inside the company were nothing short of a disaster. Destinee and Tyrell had inherited a well-oiled machine, but they were treating it like a personal lottery win instead of a business. Their first major executive decision was not to address the aging brake systems on our long-haul rigs or to renew the fuel contracts. Instead, they authorized a massive withdrawal from the Emergency Reserve Fund to purchase a fleet of 4 brand-new Cadillac Escalades for their personal use. They claimed that the leadership needed to look the part of a multi-million-dollar empire, but they were buying luxury while the foundation was rotting. Each vehicle cost over $100,000, a staggering sum that could have covered the insurance premiums for the entire truck fleet for the next 6 months. The arrogance of their spending was only surpassed by their incompetence in client relations. Mr. Miller, the owner of a massive pharmaceutical distribution chain, and our very first client called the office to discuss a routine delay. In the past, I would have handled him with the respect a decade-long partnership deserved. However, Destinee took the call on speakerphone while she was getting a manicure in my former office. When Mr. Miller expressed concern about the reliability of the new management, Destinee told him that he was lucky to be doing business with them at all. She told a man who provided 40% of our annual revenue that his small-town attitude was no longer welcome in her boardroom. She even had the audacity to suggest that he should pay a premium convenience fee if he wanted to keep his priority status. Tyrell was even worse, laughing in the background and calling Mr. Miller an old man who was past his prime. They did not realize that loyalty in the logistics industry is worth more than any contract. Mr. Miller, a man of immense dignity and quiet power, did not argue. He simply went silent for 5 seconds and then told them that he would be exercising the immediate termination clause in his agreement. Just like that, Ironwood Freight lost a contract worth $3 million a year. The emergency fund was empty, the biggest client was gone, and the new CEOs were too busy admiring their new Cadillacs to realize that the wheels were literally falling off their stolen wagon. They thought being in charge meant being served, never understanding that leadership is about carrying the weight of everyone else on your shoulders. The inevitable collapse began on a rainy Tuesday night on Interstate 85. One of our senior drivers, a man who had serviced his own rig for 20 years, suffered a catastrophic brake failure while carrying a full load of industrial chemicals. The investigation later revealed that Tyrell had personally canceled the last 3 scheduled maintenance appointments to save $8,500 for his country club membership fees. The truck jackknifed, causing a pileup that involved 6 passenger vehicles and sent 4 people to the hospital with serious injuries. It was the kind of disaster that insurance companies salivate over when they are looking for a reason to deny a claim. Instead of taking responsibility, Tyrell panicked. I watched through a secure back door in the Phoenix Protocol as he logged into the system from his home computer at 3 o'clock in the morning. He attempted to delete the maintenance logs and overwrite the digital inspection records to make it look like the driver was at fault. He did not realize that my AI system was recording every single keystroke and every IP address he used. Every time he deleted a file, the system created a hidden encrypted copy on my private server. He was digging a grave for the entire family, thinking he was burying his mistakes under a layer of digital dust. The next morning, my phone erupted with a call from Mama Joyce. She did not call to ask for help or to apologize for the betrayal at the dinner table. Instead, she screamed into the receiver, her voice cracking with a mixture of terror and blind rage. She accused me of being a witch and claimed that I had placed a dark curse on the family business because of my jealousy toward Destinee. She said that my heart was as black as coal for watching them struggle while the state authorities moved in to impound the remaining fleet. The Department of Transportation had issued an immediate cease and desist order, and the preliminary fines already totaled $550,000. Mama Joyce called me an ungrateful daughter who was happy to see her parents lose everything, never once acknowledging that it was their own greed and Tyrell's cowardice that had lit the match. I listened to her bile for exactly 60 seconds before I hung up, realizing that they would rather blame the devil than look at the mirror. The financial rot at Ironwood Freight had spread faster than a wildfire in a dry forest. As I sat in my quiet home office, my private investigator sent over a digital file that made my blood run cold. I discovered that Pops Jerome, a man who had always preached about the sanctity of land and legacy, had done the unthinkable. In a desperate attempt to inject cash into the bleeding company and cover the catastrophic fines from Tyrell's negligence, he had taken out a massive second mortgage on the family home. This was the same brick house on the outskirts of Atlanta, where I had taken my first steps and where the measurement marks of our heights were still etched into the kitchen doorframe. It was his greatest pride, a symbol of a black man's hard work in a world that often tried to take everything away. Now it was being served up to the bank as a sacrificial lamb for a business that was already a corpse. But the betrayal did not stop with my father's misplaced loyalty. The deeper I dug into the transaction logs of the corporate account, the more I saw the true face of the man they had chosen over me. Tyrell was not just incompetent, he was a thief. While Destinee was crying to Mama Joyce about the unfairness of the world, her husband was funneling thousands of dollars into private offshore accounts. I tracked a series of wire transfers totaling over $200,000, all originating from the company's dwindling payroll fund. The destination was a high-stakes gambling junket in Las Vegas. Tyrell had been using the company's lifeblood to chase his losses at the blackjack tables, while our drivers were wondering if their next checks would bounce. He was stealing the shingles off the roof to pay for his sins in the desert. My family had handed the keys to a wolf, and now that wolf was devouring the very walls that sheltered them. I realized then that my father's pride and my mother's favoritism had blinded them to the serpent in their own garden. The rain was pouring down in thick sheets over the city when the doorbell to my private residence began to chime incessantly. I looked at the high-definition monitor of my security system and saw a sight that would have broken the old version of Kenzli. There stood Mama Joyce, Pops Jerome, and Destinee huddled together under a single frayed umbrella. Their expensive Cadillac Escalades had already been towed away by the bank, leaving them to arrive in a battered yellow taxi. Pops Jerome was holding a crumpled yellow envelope, the official notice of foreclosure on the family home. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, his shoulders hunched under the weight of a 72-hour eviction notice. Mama Joyce was sobbing loudly, her face pressed toward the camera lens as she begged me to open the door. She wailed about how they were about to be homeless and how Destinee's 3 children had no place to sleep because of the mounting debts Tyrell had left behind. Destinee stood behind her, her pride finally shattered, looking at the ground in silence. They were not here to apologize for the years of emotional labor they had stolen from me. They were here because I was the only person with the $500,000 required to stop the bank from locking their doors. My heart ached with a sharp physical pain as I watched my father wipe a tear from his weathered cheek. I leaned against the cold marble counter of my kitchen, my finger hovering over the intercom button. I wanted to save them. Every instinct in my body told me to protect my elders and provide for my sister. But then I remembered the conference room. I remembered the way they laughed when they stripped me of my title. I realized that if I wrote that check today, I would be validating their belief that I was merely a tool for their convenience. I would be teaching them that they could disrespect me, rob me, and humiliate me, and I would still be there to clean up their mess. I picked up the receiver and spoke in a voice that was as calm as a winter morning. I told them that I could not help them. I told them that the house was lost because they chose a thief over a daughter, and that respect was a currency they had spent long ago. I watched them crumble on my doorstep, knowing that true love sometimes requires the courage to let those you love face the consequences of their own choices. The auction room in the county courthouse was sterile and smelled of old paper and desperation. Ironwood Freight, the empire I had built with 12 years of my life, was being sold off piece by piece to satisfy the mounting debts and legal judgments. I sat in the back row wearing a sharp black suit and dark sunglasses, watching my family from a distance. Pops Jerome and Mama Joyce looked like ghosts of their former selves, sitting on the opposite side of the room with their heads bowed in shame. They were waiting for a miracle that would never come from the strangers in the room. The auctioneer started the bidding for the entire corporate entity, including the remaining fleet and the warehouse leases. The room remained silent. No serious investor would touch a company drowning in lawsuits and crippled by a proprietary software system that was currently locked behind an unbreakable encryption. The opening bid was set at $4 million, a fraction of the $7,200,000 it was worth when I was at the helm. When the silence became unbearable, I raised my hand. I introduced myself not as their daughter, but as the president of Phoenix Holdings. The auctioneer called out for other bids, but there were none. I bought back my life's work for $4 million, exactly the amount needed to clear the family's debt to the bank and the state. My parents turned around, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a sudden pathetic hope. They thought I was saving them. They did not realize that I was simply reclaiming what was mine and letting the rot of their betrayal be buried with the old name of the company. I was now the sole owner of 100% of the assets, and for the first time, I did not have to share my throne with people who had tried to set it on fire. As the gavel fell and confirmed my ownership of the assets, the heavy doors of the courtroom swung open. 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Division walked straight toward Tyrell, who was trying to slip out of the side exit. I handed them the encrypted drive containing the evidence of his fraud, the gambling wire transfers, and the video logs of him tampering with the accident evidence. The metallic click of the handcuffs echoing in the marble hallway was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Tyrell began to scream at Destinee to help him, but the police led him away in disgrace to face 20 years of his own making. Destinee collapsed into a chair, finally realizing that the man she chose as her partner had been the one to tighten the noose around their necks. I walked over to my parents, who were trembling with a mixture of fear and relief. I reached into my bag and pulled out the deed to the family home, which I had purchased from the bank exactly 1 hour before the auction. Mama Joyce reached out to hug me, calling me her savior, but I took a step back. I handed her a legal document that was not a gift, but a lease agreement. I told them that they could move back into the house, but they would do so as my tenants, not my masters. The contract included a strict code of conduct regarding mutual respect and a prohibition on Tyrell or Destinee ever exercising authority over my affairs again. Pops Jerome looked at the paper, then at me, seeing for the first time that the daughter he tried to break was now the woman who held his entire world in her palm. I told them that the era of me being a servant to their favoritism was over. I was no longer the girl seeking a seat at their table because I had built an entire city of my own. I turned my back on their tears and walked out into the bright Atlanta sun. I was the master of my own fate, the owner of my own legacy, and for the first time in 34 years, I was truly free.